Andrew's joining us.
And we're now live.
Thank you. So good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting of the District of Sechelt. It is Wednesday, October 7th, and it is 7 p.m. And we are coming to you from the traditional territory of the Sechelt Nation. We have an amended agenda, and we'd like to make a further amendment to that. Delegation 3.2, Colin Stansfield from the Sunshine Coast Regional Economic Development Organization will not be attending this evening. He's going to be joining us on Wednesday next at our Committee of the Whole meeting. So we are removing that from this meeting. Are there any other additions or deletions from staff? None? All right. I'd like a motion to adopt the amended agenda. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And just for those watching, Councillor Rowe is away this week. So she's taking a much needed mental health break. So let's move on to appointments and delegations. We have Chris Hergensheimer from One Straw Society presenting to us. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me present tonight. I have a few slides. Am I able to share my screen and is that feature on for me, Jennifer?
Yes, it is.
Okay, excellent. Just going to do that here. We can all see that now?
Yes, we can.
Looking great. Excellent. So thanks for having me come and present tonight. So much work has gone into this short little document that you have in front of you. And so I appreciate the chance to speak with council about it further. So why a food charter and why now? There's a bunch of background information in that particular food charter copy that you have, but I think it's more important just to talk about it in terms of an overarching statement of what it could possibly do. And I like to think about a food charter as a driver of vision, actions, and strategies for a civically engaged food system, meaning one that's we don't see as separate from other policy and actions that we take on as a community. And the local food systems have really become representative of civic engagement as people seek to sort of relocalize and lots of direct marketing as we move in. So whether the charter is promoting local investment in agriculture or driving efforts to preserve farmland or promoting food co-ops or creating policies around urban ag, a charter kind of recommends to decision makers at all levels of government where they should put their efforts. And another way, I guess, to look at it is that a food charter's a broad community statement, maybe a set of goals that sort of describe how members of a specified community, in our case, the District of Sechelt, want their food system to be maintained. By including the voices of lots of stakeholders over the years, food charters really encourage a broad base of support, cross-sectorial collaboration, and community connections. They can also be used as an education piece. They sometimes help raise awareness about food system concerns and weaknesses and offer a platform for discussion and advocacy. But that's admittedly a little bit less of a priority for us given the society's focus on education. We do a lot of education. I guess the why now is kind of obvious to those of us who are deeply invested in this and not as obvious to others, but the past 7 months has really given us insight into many of the risks or potential risks associated with the global food system. And while we personally didn't feel the impacts more than some flour quotas at our grocery stores, the risk could have been much greater and more disruptive. And the pandemic has provided a window through which we can clearly see the potential risks, and we can act in really small ways to help mitigate these risks. But I'll also add an addendum to that, which is it's obvious that the sort of doom and gloom and if the ferry stopped running type discourses are actually not getting us where we need to be. I've been deeply involved in this work for 14 years, ever since I've come to the coast, and we're not that much farther along than we were then in some regards. Public sector investment is almost non-existent in agriculture. The farming sector is near stagnant due to really high land prices and lack of additional markets. And I think we need a new discourse. It might be about economics, it might be about community health, it might be about climate change, but perhaps the charter sort of visioning really positive type discourse can get things moving in the right direction. Most importantly, food charters are not policy statements. So we don't want to think about the stuff in there as a specific policy, but it should act as inspiration for how we might develop local food policy or initiatives for the community. But food charters also have other uses, like in municipal strategic planning or promoting government endorsement and accountability, or offering a long-term sort of reference point for community and governmental partnerships. And often governmental participation in these things can drive others to come on board with certain initiatives. And I really think these types of activities, apart from the policy at this point in time, are where the district's support is really needed. I see there's an ag land use survey, there's an urban ag survey, and that kind of engagement and looking at how some of those policies can be shaped. A charter can help with a guiding document when we come there. So our food charter, I'll just let it be known that almost every community in this province has a food charter, whether they're rural or urban. Ours has been in the works for over 5 years, deep consultation with a number of stakeholders, experts, gone back and forth, lots of collaborative writing on this. And really what we're trying to do we have now 12 organizations who all have a connection or interest in these ideals and principles, and they've signed on. And I mean, we're hoping to make that 16 with all local governments on board. But the idea is really to build this exponential base of support so we can really talk about support for these principles in the thousands. Because if we have 10, 12, 15 organizations with all their membership in support of these things, we can really start to move something forward. There's been some critiques that I've heard that the charter is really high level, it's really ambitious, it's not actionable, or it's not project oriented. And I want to make it clear that it's meant to be high level. It's not an action document. It does not list a series of projects or things like that. The purpose of the charter is to provide a common framework and a set of agreed upon ideals from which projects, policies, initiatives can emerge and find support. So when we have a specific actionable project and it's brought before council, now we have a starting point for agreement that that project would be supported in principle, coming back to the idea that food charters are sources of inspiration. And I dare say the idea that it would be, in agreement, that we would all be in agreement about those principles. So we have our principles listed through there, and we can see what they can do, providing inspiration and these types of things. Our principles really focus around collaboration, participation, health and well-being, cultural vitality, environmental stewardship, economic vitality, all of which are defined in the charter. So we can see where some of this stuff about it being very high level and not actionable and not specific. So I just wanted to make sure that we're understanding that it's meant to be that in a guiding principle rather than an action plan for how we build a food system. What can they do? What can charters do? Well, they can help with food systems policy development, or they can help drive specific projects and initiatives. And on the policy development side, it's really important to stress that food charters call for the creation of food systems policy, not just local agriculture policy, because food systems really look at everything from seed all the way to waste, processing, disposal, consumption, those type of things. And when we look at only at ag policy, we can risk an intervention in one part of the cycle that actually can have negative consequences in other parts of the cycle. So when we look at food systems policy, we're really looking at and making choices about where we intervene and making sure that it's going to have positive ripple effects all the way through that cycle as much as possible. So from policy and planning perspective, we could really develop and adopt food systems policies as part of the planning department of municipalities. We could look at barriers to food system planning that currently exist and how we can restructure some of those. Public health, things like that. Examples in Canada might be investments in innovation to increase the agriculture and food sector's capacity to produce better food, revisiting regulations that prevent agriculture's capacity to scale up, basically getting any of the friction out of the system that's preventing more food locally from being grown and moving into markets within reason. And so what's my ask here tonight? It's we, the creators and facilitators of this document, request that the District of Sechelt fully endorse the Sunshine Coast Food Charter as a public statement of principles related to the health and future of our food system. There's no financial commitment and no commitment to fund current or future activities at this point in time. However, I'll say there is the understanding that if a community group, a business, or an individual brings forward an initiative or an idea that fall under the purview of the charter ideals and goals, council will consider them in relation to their commitment to the overarching goals of the charter, mainly that of strengthening our food system and its associated positive impacts. So we would like you to add your name to this growing list of supporters and send a signal to the community that the District of Sechelt strongly supports the future of our local food system. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions for Chris or comments? Okay. I'll ask you one. I noticed on your list, you have all the governments down, you have pending. So we're the first presentation you've done on the coast?
That's correct.
Okay, and you'll be presenting to the others this month or sometime in the next while?
We have the rest of the delegations are scheduled before the end of 2020.
Okay.
So certainly by the end of 2020, we and I will just make one comment that our two biggest asks on the list of endorsements were for Sunshine Coast Community Services Society, given that they do so much work around food provisioning and food banks for vulnerable populations, as well as the Southern Sunshine Coast Farmers Institute. And we spent a significant amount of time with them discussing this food charter and working with them, and they have since come on board with full endorsement, both of those groups as well. So the two pending on there, other than the governmental authorities, now we have all our people on board with us in all our organizations.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, Council? Councillor Lamb.
Push the wrong button. I know talking to a couple of different farmers around here, like they've had a banner year, they've had lots of support from the local community. How much produce and that, or how much food do we grow here on the coast? Does it give us 10% of the food we need, or does it give us 30% of the food we need?
Yeah, that's a bit of a tricky question, and I'm a data person as well, and there's a lack of data about that, but recent projections put it around 3%. Realistically, it's probably around 1 or 1.5% of the food we consume on the coast is grown here, and that would be during seasonal at best. So, you know, the projections we envision to be at, 20% self-sufficiency, and these types of numbers, they're very aspirational without, significant investments in capital and significant examining of regulations and other support mechanisms that put friction into the system, as well as, the labor challenge and land challenges are significant, as well as farmers' ability to scale up and reach new markets. Using farmers markets and farm stands, has a definite endpoint in terms of how much production can move into the local supply chain. So we really need to look at distribution systems and other things to get to provide an opportunity for farmers to meet that growing demand by helping build those systems to bring them to market. So yeah, it's a very, very small amount. There's a lot of growers growing a lot of great food and working really, really hard on the system, but still a very, very small percentage of our food is produced locally here.
Okay, other counselors? Counselor McLean.
Yeah, so just seconding Councillor Lamb's comment about kind of monitoring and evaluation, like you mentioned, Chris. Kind of leads me to my bigger question is, what are the next steps from this? In my perspective, this is a very, very high level plan. I personally would like to see more detailed, more actionable items. So is this up to one straw to start developing those kind of things, or are you looking for government support, or could it really come from anywhere?
I think the purpose of the endorsement of the food charter is not to endorse a particular plan at this point. That will fall to the local organizations who want to be spearheading these types of projects. It might be One Straw, it might be community services, it might be the Farmers Institute, it might be the Conservation Association, it might be a private business. The understanding of the charter is that when those very specific plans and actions come before you, we have a shared understanding that the growth and sustainability and basically assistance for the proposed action items, whatever they may be, and as long as they fall under the purview of the principles outlined here, would be supported in principle. We don't want to have to come in cold calling in terms of is council on board? Does the district believe that the environmental health and the cultural well-being and the economic aspects of farming are important? And endorsing this document sends a signal that yes, the district does believe that. Then I come to you with a project and I say, we'd like to build a post-harvest processing facility in Sechelt, and we'd like a grant of $40,000 a contribution from that, and here's the plan, here's the monitoring, here's all the budget and timelines, and all that work has been done, and we're not having to come in with the understanding that we don't know where council stands on support for these types of things. So it is broad enough that any action or initiative or project developed by a community group would potentially fall under those principles. And we're not saying you would need to support every single one of them, but we're trying to get a sense from all these groups that if we were to rally for something, that we would have the support of these 12 groups plus our 4 local governments behind us, whether that be seeking provincial funding or various other things that we might need.
Councilor McLean.
Yeah, so I guess my concern is how we developing strategy for achieving some of these principles. The model that you have proposed is very much grassroots, bottom up, which has value. But me as a decision maker, I want to see the options on the table and what will be the best value for our money. And what will help us achieve these goals. So by taking a project by project approach, we don't get that kind of whole picture, that higher level thinking. We're just looking at whatever has the most energy behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I will speak to that because in 2015, there was an extensive agricultural area plan done with a lot of consultation. It laid out a very, very clear roadmap about where investment would come from, what sorts of projects would line up there, a very, very clear set of sort of action items, and very little follow through has happened, despite having that very, strategically oriented multi-year plan laid out before us. A lot of it became piecemeal approaches and not necessarily focusing on those. So I would love to present a plan to all the governments based on my decade of experience in this sector and my experience doing the research and the projections around this. My organization doesn't have the funding for me to do that. And I think at this point, little by little at the grassroots level is how we're going to move the needle on the small things until we get to the point where we require larger capital investments or investments in agricultural labor grants or whatever they may be to help grow that. I think at this point, we don't have the resources to do a full strategic plan for what the local food sector looks like at this point in time. And we can go back to that one published in 2015 and really see a plan with some actionable projects and outcomes where there hasn't been as much follow through as many of us would have liked to see.
Okay, so that leads into, I was going to ask you about the Sunshine Coast Agricultural Plan, because that was adopted at the regional district. And did have, right, there was a lot of consultation and it's very detailed. So Councillor McLean, if you're looking for stuff, it's in that document, lots of information there. Who though, that's the plan. So that's what Councillor McLean's saying, like, we need to see something moving forward. So there is that plan. You're coming with this food charter. How are we going to actually see something happen? Who's going to be taking the lead on this? Is it One Straw that's going to be saying, we're the group that's going to make this happen?
Mayor, I wish that was me, and I wish I could have the resources to do that. We could do a scoping audit of that 2015 plan, update some of the baseline data, see what's changed since then, because there have been significant changes in the sector since 2015. And then we could really start to look at some of those action items and say which of them are realistic. The people who are tasked as the lead organizations, go check in with them and make sure they want the responsibility of being lead organizations on some of these. And I think that, I just gave a presentation last week for the organization about what we don't know about the local food sector. And a lot of it has to do with, we're basing it on very, old sort of 5 to 7 year old statistical data that doesn't necessarily capture the lived experience of producers on the Sunshine Coast who are struggling to find markets, to deal with rising land prices, bringing cost of inputs over and build viable farm businesses. So as much as people don't want to see more research, there's a necessary research component to update some of what we knew in 2013 and 14 to the conditions of 2020 before we can start building policies and regulation revisions that are going to support the food system based on evidence, because I think that's really going to push us forward. And if we get 2 or 3 good initiatives out of examining the evidence and are able to lay those out, I think that'll do us, it'll be worth the extra effort we're able to put into that. It's simply a funding issue at this point in time. A significant amount of money went into that plan in 2015. And to do that kind of engagement, we would need perhaps not that much, but a comparable amount of money to undertake a scoping analysis of where we're at in 2020, especially post-pandemic.
Okay. All right.
So
Anybody else?
In closing, it is a complicated issue because we're going back and forward between developing very, very specific plans that we have to tackle on a piecemeal basis, one at a time as they come. And I see, Councillor McLean's concerns around that. And we have some concerns around that too. We would love to see some sort of overall food sustainability strategy for the Sunshine Coast being built that, that covers 5 or 10 good projects that are going to bump up the food supply to 5 or 10% over 5 or 10 years, like some realistic numbers, not not throwing out a 20% or 30% number that we just realistically cannot get to without a significant investment. So it would be great to develop a strategy that had some very actionable plans, even a small number that could begin to move the needle. Because the difference between 2% of our food and 5% of our food is actually a very, very big difference. And that's a bit tall ask for our farmers, our existing farmers, to be doubling their output and moving more of that into the supply chain. So I would think that's a very ambitious goal for the next sort of 2 to 5 years, and something that if we could lay it out a plan in terms of what do they need. And me as a researcher, my sense is I need to hear from them what they need. I can't propose to say this is what you need based on my expertise, you know, taken out of context from their lived experiences.
All right, any other questions or comments from council? All right, what would you like to do at this point? What would you like to, okay, Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I think at this stage, I'm not ready for endorsement today.
Mhm.
And the reason being, I wasn't clear that we were going for endorsement today. Essentially, I need to take another read through this and make sure that I'm fully comfortable endorsing every item in there. Because as a delegation, I viewed this as more of an information point. So I think I'd like to make a motion to defer let me try that again. Defer endorsement of the Sunshine Coast Food Charter to the next council meeting.
Okay, is there a seconder? It's seconded. Okay, and in the meantime, I would also like to see staff go through this and come back with, you know, maybe implications that they see as well. Because if we did endorse this, I'd like to know what that means on their side. So I'm in favor of deferring it. Do you want to specify when?
I said the next council meeting.
Next council meeting, okay. And anybody else want to speak to that? All right, so we have a motion on the floor to defer this to the next council meeting. All those in favor? Thank you. All right, thank you, Chris.
Thank you
Appreciate
very much.
coming here.
That's
Thank you.
perfectly acceptable with me, and I thank you for having me and deferring to next. I'll just put it out there that I do have a delegation on the 12th of November to the SCRD as well, where I'll be requesting endorsement. So if we knew one way or another where Sechelt would stand, I would be able to add that into my presentation. So
Sorry, on what day were you?
Thank you very much.
Sorry, what day were you going there?
it's the 12th of November.
Oh, 12th of November, okay. So our next council meeting will be the 21st
Okay, excellent.
October.
So I look forward to your decision then. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, regards.
So we'll move on to item 4.1. This is a proclamation for Waste Reduction Week, October 19th through 25th, 2020. Whereas as a municipality, we are committed to conserving resources, protecting the environment, and educating the community. And whereas we recognize the generation of solid waste and the needless waste of water and energy resources as global environment problems, and endeavor to take the lead in our community toward environmental sustainability. Now, therefore, I, Darnell de Seegers, on behalf of the District of Sechelt, do hereby proclaim that October 19th through 25th, 2020 shall be known as Waste Reduction Week in the District of Sechelt. So we'll move on to item 5.1, minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of September 16th, 2020. And this is before us for adoption. Someone like to move adoption? Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes? No business arising. We'll move on to item 7.1. This is minutes of the committee of the whole meeting, Wednesday, September 9th. This is for receipt and endorsement. I'll look for someone to move receipt and endorsement and seconded. Any errors or omissions in this one? All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to bylaws. Item 8.1A, this is on page 30. This is 2020 Permissive Tax Exemption Amendment Bylaw number 585-1, 2020. First motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Douglas, over to you.
If I could, I'd like to share my screen. I have just a short presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. 2020 permissive tax exemption. Last year we did a 4-year bylaw, knowing that we would only bring new items to council year to year. And this year we received one applicant put in for 2 properties. And so the purpose of this report is to seek council's approval in amending the 2020 permissive property tax exemption bylaw number 585/2019 to include the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 140 in the list of exempt properties, and to seek council's approval for the proposed permissive tax exemptions pursuant to section 224 of the community charter for 2021, 22, and 23 tax years. The Royal Canadian Branch brought in 2 applications for 2 different properties. We would be just matching the remainder of the exemptions for years, meaning we would go 2021, 22, 23. Any changes to the occupancy of either of these properties will result in a future report to council and potential amendment to the same bylaw. The 2 properties that they brought forward are these 2, one on Wharf Street, the one that they currently are in, and the one on Seashell Inlet, the one that they're putting, they're going to be moving into. These properties have been advertised in the paper. This is the tax amount that we would be giving up or making other taxpayers pay for. 5591 Wharf Street, both $6,500, and 5546 Seashell or Inlet Avenue, a little bit more than that, $9,800. So the recommendation here is to give first, second, and third reading to 2020 permissive tax exemption amendment bylaw number 585-1, 2019, to include the Royal Canadian Branch Legion tax exemption properties. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question for you before you move away. If something changes partway through the year, how does that impact this? So I know it has to be in October, right? For the following year, like the subsequent year. But what happens if, I don't know, in June of that year, they no longer are occupying one of those properties? What does that do?
And nothing. It stays exempt for the entire year. I had, before I put these properties into the bylaw, I had a fairly lengthy conversation with the Legion, and they're pretty confident that they will not be in their new facility for maybe even not next year.
Okay. And
They
then their new building may or may not be eligible once they have determined what they're going to be using it for, correct?
Yep.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Toth and Councillor McLean.
What was their status of Wharf Avenue for 2020? Because we passed the 4-year bylaw previously. Were they not included in that bylaw at the time?
They did not apply last year. And we had conversation with them several times, and they declined to apply last year, and but recognized their what they had done and are applying this year.
Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I just want clarification on the split use of the Wharf Avenue property.
Yes,
I believe the report says that it's 50-50, so that's essentially the pub side versus the hall side. Is that
Correct.
what we're proposing to continue on with?
correct. The pub side is not being recommended here for permissive, just the hall side. And when they move into their new facility, it'll be evaluated at that point as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Lamb.
So this tax exemption, does that, they would still pay their water usage and septage or sewer user fees, or the sewer portion of their taxes, or no?
Yes. They would pay everything. They would pay their water, sewer, garbage. Well, I guess they're not on garbage, but yes, they would pay everything else.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, so there's a recommendation on page 30. Councillor Toth.
I will move recommendation 2 as presented. The council give first, second, and third reading to 2020 permissive tax exemption amendment bylaw 585-1/2020 to include the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 140 in the tax exempt list of properties.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. So we'll move to item 8.1B on page 33. This is District of Sechelt 2020 permissive property tax exemption amendment bylaw number 585-1/2020. A bylaw to amend 2020 permissive tax exemption bylaw number 585-2019 to add 2 properties owned by Royal Canadian Legion Branch 140. And I'd look for someone to move first reading. Moved, seconded, all in favor? And second reading? Moved, seconded, all in favor? And third reading? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item. Hang on, I have to get to the next agenda item. There we go. Oh, I went past it. There we go. Item 8.2A. This is zoning bylaw amendment 25-289-2018, 6317 Bly Road, West Sechelt. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll be brief. The bylaw is basically ready for adoption. The rezoning conditions have all been met. So the affordable housing contribution has been submitted, and the 2 covenants have been registered on title. So it's ready for adoption, ready to be completed. And then they can, assuming that gets done, then they can move forward with the subdivision application.
All right, any questions for Mr. Hall? All right, there's a recommendation on page 37. Councillor Toth.
That's just about the shortest recommendation ever. I will move recommendation 2, the council adopt zoning amendment bylaw 25-289-2018.
Is there a seconder? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Move on to item 8.2B, the actual bylaw on page 39. This is District of Sechelt bylaw number 25-289-2018 for Everbright Ventures, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25-1987 by rezoning a property at 6317 Bly Road from R3 to R1. And on the next page, we were looking for someone to move adoption. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hall. No new business, so we'll move on to item 10.1. This is Agricultural Land Commission non-farm use application for campground, 6540 Reeves Road. First, a motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Kovaritz.
Thank you. I don't have a PowerPoint for you today with this application. It's fairly straightforward, but it's a application for a non-farm use for a campground that's currently operating at 6540 Reeves Road. In this case, the campground use is not permitted under the ALC regulations, and therefore for the use to continue, the applicant is required to apply for a non-farm use application with the Agricultural Land Commission. Before the Agricultural Land Commission can proceed with this type of application, they require a resolution from the local government to allow them to consider the application. In this case, because our zoning bylaw has historically permitted campground use, despite it not being strictly in compliance with the Agricultural Land Commission regulations, we are recommending that the Agricultural Land Commission proceed with evaluating the application to determine whether this type of use is compatible with the agricultural land reserve in the area. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, council, any questions? Councillor Toth, Councillor McLean.
I suppose in reading through the report here on page 43 of the agenda package, talks about the zoning bylaw updates, basically prohibiting non-farm use in the future. At that time, this property, I guess, will be legal non-conforming.
That would be the case, yes. If any future bylaw updates do mirror the regulations of the ALC, that would continue to be the case, that it would be non-conforming as far as our local zoning bylaw goes. However, they would still be in possession of a non-farm use approval should they get that, which means as long as the campground use was continuing and didn't cease, they would be grandfathered, so to speak.
A follow-up on that, what length of time does the use have to cease before it has to be reapplied for?
That's a good question. There's certainly a case law that talks more about intent rather than actual stopping of the use. So, for example, seasonal uses would still be protected as far as grandfathering. So it would take a fairly intentful stopping of the operation of the campground for it to cease being a permitted use.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McLean.
Okay, so I have a question around the campground designation and the long-term use of the site. So I understand that they're currently permitted to have a campground. Are they currently permitted to have longer-term use? And I guess what is the difference?
That's a big question. There's no given definition of long or short term. I've included the definition, the strict definition of campground in our zoning bylaw, and the intent is certainly to apply to, what we refer to as the traveling public. A campground, much in the way that Porpoise Bay Provincial Park is a campground. As we know, longer term residential use does exist in campgrounds, particularly private campgrounds across the Sunshine Coast. So certainly staff did visit the site, and we determined that there were people living in more long-term situations in a campground such as this, but we don't have a strict definition of when a campground use goes from short-term to long-term.
Follow up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess maybe that's something we can address in the new zoning bylaw, but for now, would it be acceptable to forward an application onto the ALC knowing that the use does not meet the traditional definition of campground, but legally it's okay because we're not well defined?
Well, I think as I stated in the staff report, the long-term solution is compliance with the zoning bylaw and campground use. So we would want to see what the ALC has to say on this use. If they determine that campground use in the way that our definition lays it out and the way that they would consider campgrounds, then we could move on with a solution for compliance with the property owner in a voluntary manner, presumably.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lamb, I think you were, Councillor Lamb and then Councillor Scott.
I was just wondering how this, I guess this is probably in the future a little bit, but how this would affect their taxes, because right now they're probably paying out ALC taxes, which are very minimal, but they've been carrying on business there. And then the other one would be once they, if they do get the change and they are allowed to keep their campground there, would Vancouver Coastal Health come in to check on their septage, or is that, you know, on their field? Would that be something that they would have to look into?
I'll address the septage issue first. So that is a highlight of the situation, is that the proper septic fields were installed when the campground started operation in 2008. So there are septic filings that Vancouver Coastal Health has authorized those sewage systems. In regards to, sorry, can you repeat the first question again?
Taxes.
Right, the taxes. So typically tax assessments can be mixed. So if there is a commercial use, presumably the tax percentage of the property would shift accordingly. I'm actually not aware at this point if they have farm class status currently, but if they did, they would have an exemption on the portion of the property that is used for farm use.
Okay, Councillor Scott.
My question was on the taxes as well. As this moves forward, if they get approved with that, are we going to see a change for that portion to a commercial tax base?
I'd have to clarify that. I'm not sure if it would go to a full commercial designation. That's something that staff would have to look into.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes, once BC assessment, had got a hold of the information here, they may reclass part of that property. It would either go to recreation or to business. I'm not sure which one it would go to, but either one would have a higher tax rate to it than if it were in a farm class.
Okay, and I have a question about business license. So they have not paid any business fees from 2017 to 2018. So their business license is canceled. So is that something that once we get this piece sorted out with the ALC, that we would then be pursuing?
Yes, and essentially that's how this issue came to light, was through the business licensing. Staff were made aware that ALC permission hadn't been obtained. And so we're in a position now where we wouldn't be able to issue a business license until the non-farm use application is considered and approved.
Okay. Any further questions? So there are some recommendations on page 41. What would you like to do? Councillor McLean.
There's a button. Okay. I will move recommendation 2, that council authorize submission of the Agricultural Land Commission non-farm use application campground use at 6540 Reeves Road to the Agricultural Land Commission for consideration. Also move recommendation 3, that the Agricultural Land Commission consider the following conditions: that campground use be restricted to the existing area and the number of campground sites be restricted to the existing 10 sites.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Toth.
It's not so much, well, it's a little bit about the motion. It's partly to something Councillor McLean mentioned earlier with the updating of the zoning bylaw. We have to be careful about the long-term versus short-term camping. I do know that there have been other municipalities that have run afoul of trying to prohibit long-term stays due to whatever going on in provincial policy. And so I just want to make sure we don't fall into that pit trap when we do update our zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? All those in favor, Councillor Kuster?
I just have Alton's comment just made me think. So how do you determine like short-term, long-term? They're living here all year long. How is it considered like a campground?
Well, currently it would not conform as a campground use under our zoning bylaws. So again, if the ALC comes back and denies this application, our bylaw enforcement officers would deal with the property owner to seek compliance. So one way or the other, compliance is going to be required, which either would involve removing the campground if there was no non-farm use granted, and if it is, we would look at compliance as far as it actually being used as a campground for the traveling public rather than full-time residential occupancy.
Councillor Toth?
I believe many other jurisdictions try and regulate the short-term camping stay to 6 months or less. Whether they have success or not in that matter, I believe the city of Surrey was recently challenged on that.
Mr. Hall?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, other jurisdictions will have, distinguish between short and long term. Short term less than 30 days, and long term longer than that. That's another common figure that you might see. So in terms of a campground, less than 30 days staying there. I guess it'll be a little bit different in the ALR because long-term accommodation is much more restricted, whether it's a campground or dwellings, whatever it is, versus a campground outside of the ALR. So this particular property will be in a different situation on how it gets resolved versus a property outside that would have a campground use that wasn't affected by the ALR.
All right, any other further questions or comments on the motion on the floor? All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you. So we'll move on to next item. It is 10.2. This is a development variance permit request for Westcore Lands Limited subdivision 5650 Curtis Place. Item 10.2, page 52. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Mr. Hall.
Okay, thank you. Yep, this is another short one. This variance application is strictly in relation to the subdivision application, looking at two different aspects. One, around the corner truncations for the new lane that would be developed at the rear of the properties, reducing it from the 6 by 6 meters down to 3 by 3. And then the other aspect, looking at the Curtis Place frontage requirements and reducing some of those frontage requirements in order to allow some works for the full width of the road, where normally that would have to be addressed through a different mechanism. But in reducing some of the frontage requirements, we've negotiated with the applicant that they could do works for the full width of the road that we result in a better outcome for Curtis Place overall. There's no need for a sidewalk on this frontage. There's no existing sidewalk anywhere along Curtis Place, and it is a dead-end road. So there would be no point to put in a sidewalk stub along this section, because it would never be built out on either side of the street for any length of the street. And this change would result in improving the full width of the road. And the corner truncations for the lane fit better with a lane being a narrower width. The 6 by 6 meters is quite substantial. For a lane, it's 6 by 6 would make more sense for major roads, whereas a lane with the 7 meter width doesn't need the same large truncations.
And any questions? Mr. Toth, Councillor Toth, Director Toth, what do you want to be called?
Whatever I am. Tomorrow I'll be chair, but totally derailed me. The lane in question here, sorry, looking at the map on page 53, is that intended to run parallel to Apple Orchard and Lloyd, sort of down the center of between those parcels?
Yeah, so it will end up between the existing lots on the south that front Lloyd Avenue, and then the new lots that would be created along Apple Orchard. So then the lane will be running between those two blocks.
Okay, thank you. And then just as a quick follow-up, sort of adjacent to 5650, Curtis Place through there's gravel right now, isn't it?
Yeah, there's definitely sections. It's not a full width paved road in sections. So that's why the change was proposed to say, hey, there's no, a sidewalk on this frontage wouldn't add anything of value here. And if we can, through negotiation and the variance, create works to finish the whole road, results in a better outcome for the neighborhood.
Certainly, a sidewalk on a half gravel road does not make sense. So thank you very much.
You want any floating sidewalks out there? Yeah, pieces, yeah, okay. Any other questions or comments? There's a recommendation on page 52. What would you like to do? Councillor McLean.
I'll move recommendation 2 that council approve development variance permit 2020-07 for lot 1, district lot 4299, plan BCP 199117 PID 026-389-363 at 5650 Curtis Place.
All right, is there a seconder? Seconded. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Moving on to item 10.3. This is on page 58. Yeah, 58. Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities, ICIP RNC, Trail Avenue Phase 2 construction and financial commitment. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Mr. Bandera.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is
Okay, Sanat, I think you just turned your camera off. So how about you turn it back on? There
okay.
you go. We can see you. Thank you.
Okay. This is a brief presentation for you tonight about the district application for investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, ICIP RNC, with respect to Trail Avenue Phase 2 project. I have a brief presentation, so I will put share screen. Okay, the purpose of this presentation, the report, to get the council approval to apply for ICIP grant program for Trail Avenue Phase 2 construction and secure 10% the matching funding. Also, please note that the grant deadline is October 22nd, with a mandatory construction completed date of March 31st, 2026. So we have a ample timeline to complete, and also we have timeline to get some more DCCs and improve our funding capacity. The context over here, the original project, as you know, that original project was to be formed from Treador Lane to Turnstone Drive. We tendered the project in July 2019 and received the lowest tender from Macon for total 6.7 million. The budget was drawn from DCC reserves, but there was a shortfall 1 million in road DCCs and the 200,000 shortfall in storm DCCs. The shortfall occurred due to a development downturn, which resulted in the district not receiving the anticipated the amount. As a result, the staff reduced the scope of work the project to match the available funding and brought forward and revised scope of work to council for approval in September 2019. All of the contingency and the portion of the streetlight budget will be utilized for archaeological investigations and replacement of aging sentry and storm infrastructure. So these are unforeseen circumstances that are required to be completed. So district staff have contacted the program director and the coordinator of ICIP program to confirm that the phase 2 of Trail Avenue project is eligible for funding. They have confirmed that the proposed roadworks are eligible for this grant program. So you can see here the lines, purple lines over here. This is the phase 1 end area, the upper subcircle, and this is all the way going to Turnstone Drive. That is a phase 2 construction limits. There is a design drawing for the whole project, and you can see on this side the phase 2 project end, and this one is a phase 1 project end and the phase 2 project start. So the phase 1 project is almost just past this intersection over there. The financial implications here, we can see that the total project cost 3.89 million. That also included archaeological. Last time we haven't anticipated in the budget, so this time we included that $150,000, and also we included 610 for street lights and conduit, PCI door, and rectangular the rapid beacon lights for the crosswalk lights on a couple of locations. And ICIP provide the 90% majority of that, and the district portion is 10%. That is 389,300. That will be come from DCCs, combination of DCCs and 2021 taxation. And this is the recommendation that the council directs staff to apply the grant and seek endorsement for 10% financial commitment. Thank you. That is my presentation.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, first thing is I'm wondering about this archaeological situation here. Is there a potential that we go to the local to the Siksika Nation and ask them to waive this? Most of this is going to be through rock, and then on the part from Sur Circle up, that used to be the old garbage dump before it went to where it is now. So you know, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. I don't think that there would be any reason for an archaeological study there. But I'm just wondering if there's a potential to go and ask them if they could just waive it this time.
I think what we're looking at is in the previous grant application, we didn't actually put any money in for archaeological. So we're saying is this time we want to put money in case we need to do that. That's it. And I think we've already talked to the granting group, and they indicated we could include that. Is that correct?
We haven't asked about the
we're just putting it in.
specific question, but this is a mandatory item from the ministry. Not this ministry, different ministry. So this is not the Seychelles Indian Band government requirement. This is the ministry requirement.
It's under the Heritage Act, right?
Yes.
Councillor Lamb, follow up?
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, I just, you know, just that, anyways, no, that's good. Just that lower side there. Is it Anchor? Lower side of Anchor used to be the garbage dump. That, and I can't remember when they went up to the top of up to Crystal Mountain, but it was early 60s.
So in other words, if we do some digging in there, we're going to find some interesting stuff, is what you're saying?
Might find some of my old toys.
All right, Councillor Toth.
Yeah, beat me to the punch on that one. I was gonna say, if that was the old landfill, we can expect to find lots of archaeological artifacts there. They're all just gonna be Tom's garbage. Given that we've spent middle of page 59 here, it says we've spent over $400,000 on archaeological investigations so far. I hope someday we're gonna see a report outlining exactly what we did or did not find for our money. But is 150,000 enough?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, the main corridor is trail between two oceans. So now we are going up. So it's a little bit off the two oceans, two waters, and maybe and also Councillor Tom Lamb indicated that rock just above. So and I think it will reduce the archaeological investigation. And also, we are not doing hydro undergrounding, but we are using some, not undergrounding, but overhead, but need to relocate some poles. So it's a minimum cost on that too.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor McLean.
Do we have an expected time frame for when we hear back about this? I know past federal government funding announcements have taken years. So do we have any indication that under the pandemic that it will get a quicker response?
Probably 2021 fall.
That would be great.
All right, any other questions or comments? So there's a recommendation on page 58, Councillor Toth.
I offer myself as tribute. I will move recommendation 2 that council direct staff to apply for an Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Rural and Northern Communities Grant for works for Trail Avenue construction phase 2 between Upper Surf Circle to Turnstone Drive. The district's portion of funding will be $3,893 from 2021 taxation, $100,000 from storm development cost charges, and $285,407 from roads development cost charges, for a total of $389,300, or 10% of the costs for this project, with the other 90%, $3,503,700 coming from the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities, for a total project amount of $3.893 million.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge the speed with which, I mean, I know we had this shovel ready because we'd done some of this work before, but this actually points to having some of this previous work done. In this case, this is a federal government program that was initiated very quickly, quick response times. It required that we have all the pre-work done. We would not have been able to get that done in order to apply for this unless we had it ready. So this points to us continuing to do this work to have shovel-ready projects ready to go for grant applications that come up. So thank you for that. All right, moving on to the next item. Item 10.4, page 97, sorry. It's hard when it's really small and I'm moving back and forth. Page 97. This is the Sunshine Coast Community Foundation COVID-19 Response Fund. And there's a recommendation that we receive the report. So I move and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Mr. Douglas.
Just going to share my screen for a moment. Okay, so just an update on the COVID-19 response that we've had. The purpose of this report is to provide an update regarding the COVID-19 response fund, which includes individual and corporate contributions to the Sunshine Coast Community Foundation for local COVID-19 relief and support. So we extended our time frame to August 31st, 2020. That was a cutoff date. And at that point, the matching funds had been $39,218 and 33 cents, and that was from more the local crowd. Additionally, during the period that we had the COVID response fund eligible for matching, they received a $30,000 cash gift to the COVID relief fund from the Vancouver Foundation. And so all these funds were received in the eligible period, and the Sunshine Coast Community Foundation considers all these contributions eligible for the matching funds. And so that means we would be funding it to the full degree. So the financial implications here is the District Sechelt will transfer the remaining $23,185 to the Sunshine Coast Community Foundation from the Community Forest Dividend Reserve. Once the transfer is completed, the District of Sechelt will have paid the full $50,000 as per the adopted motion from April 15th, 2020. And you've already done the recommendation. Any questions?
I'm sure there will be.
All right.
Any questions from councillors? Councillor McLean.
So maybe I'll start off with a comment rather than a question. In the report, it notes that the Community Foundation considers the funds from the Vancouver Foundation as matching. I think the more critical question is, does council consider those funds as matching? The motion that we passed said, I lost it. Matching funds to any new individual or corporate contribution. So does funds that come through another foundation count? And I'm not inclined to say that they do. I'd be interested to see where this $30,000 came from. If I had to guess, it would be the federal government, but we shouldn't be guessing here. Be interested in seeing what other councillors think.
I'm going to weigh in here because if I go to the website for the Vancouver Foundation, they actually were one of the organizations that were provided with funds from the Government of Canada through the Emergency Community Support Fund. And it was their job then to disperse those to other organizations in their area. It was the Community Foundations of Canada, United Way, and Canadian Red Cross. And it says they're working with the federal government to deploy funding at the local level. So if this is the case, right, to Councillor McLean's comment, if that's the case, then we are actually matching federal funds that were funneled down to our organization, and they did not come from a corporation or any local individuals. So I don't know that. I mean, prior to the meeting, we were looking to get clarification on that. We don't have clarification. So I would like to get that information first before I say, yes, we're going to match those funds. Anybody else want to weigh in? Councillor Todd.
Yeah, when we passed this motion originally, I was ready to see the money has gone out the door. And if it came back to us, I was ready to make a motion to just release the remainder of the money. I'm okay with that money going to the causes that it's going to be going to. It would be nice to sort of know where that $30,000 did come from, but it'd be a nice to know, not a need to know in my mind. On the other hand, if we didn't pay out that remainder, that's more money we could use towards, say, item, wherever it is on our agenda here, 10.5.
The next item on the agenda, yes.
The next item on the agenda. But I'm sort of agnostic on it one way or another.
Thank you. Anybody else? Counselor Scott.
I agree with Councillor Toth on this one. It's money to a good cause, although there is lots of good causes. I'm fine to continue with it. I'm probably fairly positive that the foundation has probably pre-spent the money, based on their belief that it is their side of that donation as far as meeting the requirements. So nice to know, not need to know.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, is there anything, Councillor McLean, anything you'd like to do then in this case?
No, I think Councillor and Toth and Scott swayed me. I have no issues spending these funds. Maybe it's not done perfectly how I would have liked to see it done, but the intent was to fund community groups, and that is what the Community Foundation is doing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Moving on to our next item, item 10.5. This is Sunshine Coast Salmon Enhancement Society funding request on page 99. Motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. Once again, a quick share of my screen. Okay, so the Sunshine Coast Salmon Enhancement Society. The purpose of this report is to seek council approval in providing funding for up to $50,000 to the Sunshine Coast Salmon Enhancement Society for their Save Our Salmon project. Regular council meeting of July 15th, 2020, the Sunshine Coast Community Forest Legacy Fund Committee recommended that a grant be awarded to the Salmon Enhancement Society, funding $40,000 from the Legacy Fund and the additional $50,000 from the Legacy Reserve Fund. Now, that was the recommendation. This was for the investigation of a potential well that may be able to supply water for the Chapman Creek hatchery. Council approved the Sunshine Coast Salmon Enhancement Society be awarded the $40,000 from the 2020 Sunshine Coast Community Forest Legacy Fund. And council asked staff to confirm the reserve balances before it made a decision on the additional $50,000. At the August 5th, 2020 regular council meeting, this table was provided in a report, and it basically showed what was available in the reserve. The Community Legacy Reserve Fund is split up into kind of two portions, a short-term granting and the longer-term granting. Right now, there's about $2,000 left in the shorter term, and there's $1.149 million in the longer term. The Community Forest Dividend Fund, we just heard the report on the COVID-19 assistance, so I've put the $50,000 there. So available in the dividend reserve is $20,628. So the previous recommendation of the Sunshine Coast, so on September 9th, previous recommendation that the Sunshine Coast Salmonoid Enhancement Society's request for additional funding for $50,000 for their Save Our Salmon project be forwarded to staff to consider funding sources for inclusion in the 2021 budget and report back at a future meeting. The available balance, as I said earlier, is $20,628 after paying out the COVID relief. The remainder of these funds could be considered for the Save Our Salmon project. And if the $20,628 is used, the balance needed to fund the project would be $29,372. Council consider funding the $29,000 from 2021 revenues, future dividends from the community forest, or using a portion of the long-term legacy reserve. After consideration and looking at those reserves, staff's recommendation is that council approve the 50,000 funding to the Sunshine Coast Salmon Enhancement Society for Save Our Salmon Foundation or project to be funded as follows: 20,628 from the Community Forest Dividend Reserve and $29,372 from 2021 taxation. Thank you.
Thank you. Council McLean.
So under the recommended motion, when would the society get the funds? After our 2021 budget approval?
We could early approve this for 2021, so they could get it as early as January.
Okay, but this does not propose that early approval.
Pardon me?
Is this an early approval?
No, this
No,
would,
that's okay.
basically you're telling me to put this into the budget for next year, and I would bring back a recommendation early in the year to pre-award this funds.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Toth.
Yeah, the work of the Salmon Enhancement Society it's good work. It's important work. It's work that affects the entire Sunshine Coast, and the entire Sunshine Coast benefits from it. So I'm a little hesitant to put that 29,000 and change on taxation for the District of Sechelt. I recognize it's an easy way to go about it, but it is a 1/3% tax increase to cover that off. I actually prefer what's been presented as option 3, which is to fund a portion of it from the long-term legacy reserve. That legacy reserve was set up to benefit projects that benefit the entire Sunshine Coast, not just one community. And I think that'd be a good source of funding for this.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Scott.
Councillor Toth beat me to that one. I wholeheartedly agree. I don't want to see this funded out of general taxation. I think it should come out of that legacy fund.
Councillor Kuster.
And I was going to say the same thing. I don't think it should come out of taxation either. So I agree with Councillor Toth and Scott.
So I'm going to throw another piece in here. Why don't we see if we can approach the Sechelt Nation? They're very much in support of the Salmon Enhancement Society program. In fact, some of what they do down there is to support food for their members. Why don't we approach them and see if they're willing to put forward the $29,372? Councillor McLean.
So first of all, the suggestion to fund it from the long-term fund.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need a strategy for that fund.
Mm-hmm.
This would not be a strategic decision. This would be a one-off fund because we don't want to take it out of taxation. So we don't want to increase taxes ever. So where do we draw the line? Why not this and why something else? Or why this and not something else? Why is this the right project for the long-term legacy fund? I think we should have the general principles established before we start spending that fund. And I think we really need to have that serious discussion, but we haven't had it yet. So going back to the original recommendation, which is for funded from taxation, I think if we went out and talked to citizens, they would be willing to fund the Salmon Enhancement Society. This is something that people in Sechelt value and that we can justify using taxes for. So I'm in support of the original recommendation.
Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, I'm in favor of what the mayor was talking about here. I think that it would be good for us to approach the Sechelt Nation here and see if they would support us in this. You know, they have a fishing fleet. This is fish, you know. So I think we should ask them before we move ahead.
I think everybody's weighed in. Counselor McLean,
Let's throw a motion out there. If no one else is going, I'm going to move recommendation 2 that council approves 50,000 funding to the Sunshine Coast Salmon Enhancement Society for the Save Our Salmon project to be funded as follows: $20,628 from the Community Forest Dividend Reserve and $29,372 from 2021 taxation.
is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Okay. Go ahead, Counselor Toth.
I seconded it to put it on the floor. I
Mhm.
disagree with the concept of taking it out of taxation for just Seashelt. If we had a way to get some money out of Gibson's, the Seashelt Nation, the SCRD, make it a more community invested project, I'm down with that. But I don't think that the Seashelt taxpayers alone should be bearing this one.
Counselor McLean.
The SCRD has no funding mechanism for Sunshine Coast regional projects such as this. So I'd strongly urge our SCRD reps to create that fund in the next year. It's something that has been discussed that has not moved forward, that will make a significant change in funding not-for-profit groups. But until then, it's on us.
Counselor Toth, you have another point?
Yeah, the only mechanism the SCRD has available to do this would be grant and aid, for sure. And any sort of regional project services, setting up a service requires assent of the electors, whether you're doing an AAP or a referendum
So
on
let's do
setting
it.
up new services. Police-based victim services, for example, SCRD doesn't have a mechanism to fund that, so that's going to be coming forward at some point.
And grant and aid, just another point, maximum is $5,000. Okay, so I have a proposal in this, is that I'll support this motion, but then I'd like another motion on the floor. That prior to 2021 budget coming forward or being adopted potentially, that our council approach the Seashelt Nation Council and request they contribute to this project. Okay, so that would be another motion after this motion. Unless we
Or
do
you
it as an amendment.
Do it as an amendment. I think that's
Do it as an
clear.
amendment, okay. Amend the motion that District Seashelt Council approach the Seashelt Nation Council and request that they contribute financially to this project. And it's been seconded. Any comments on that? All those in favor of the amendment? Any opposed to the amendment? Okay, would you like that recorded? No, okay. So we have a motion on the floor with the amendment. All those in favor of the motion? 3 of 4, okay. All those against the motion? Okay, so the motion's defeated. Okay, so we don't have a motion at this point. Councilor McLean,
I'd move to defer this item to the next council meeting, where we might have a full council.
is there a seconder for that deferral? Okay, I'll second that. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, so we have to talk about it now. Councilor Toth,
I'm going to move that this item be deferred pending a council-to-council conversation with the Seashelt Nation to inquire about a proportional funding model with the Seashelt Nation.
is there a seconder for that? Seconded. All right, any further comments or questions on that one? Councilor McLean.
Yeah, can you just repeat the motion?
Something akin to deferring this until we have an opportunity for a council-to-council conversation about proportional funding of this project.
Okay, I think that has the same effect as the
Mhm.
mayor's motion.
It does.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Scott.
Alden's motion or Councillor Toss' motion just removes the piece where it goes into taxes after. So if we can't find a secondary funder through the nation or anybody else, then it's back to us to hack out where this money's coming from again.
Okay. Councillor Lamb.
When, you know, when do we have a meeting with the Shishla Nation here sometime in October, do we not?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay. So would that come up then, or should we send them a request for this in the, I guess we'll have an agenda when we go into that meeting anyways.
Yeah, we'll sort out where this can come up. We'll make sure it happens before budget. Councillor McLean.
I don't like going to the Sechelt Nation when we don't want to fund it ourselves. So yes, we are providing funds from the legacy fund dividend. So I guess the question is that our money or is it the Sunshine Coast money? So I'd like to amend the motion on the table and propose that the District of Sechelt offer to fund 50% of the funds through taxation.
Your worship, excuse me,
Yes,
Joanne,
yes.
Joanne here, we didn't
hear a seconder for the motion that's on the floor.
I believe Councillor Scott seconded that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor McLean wants to amend this motion.
And that District of Sechelt propose a 50-50 funding model with the District of Sechelt portion from taxation.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? I don't think it's being seconded. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. And this is that we defer this until we have a conversation with the Sechelt Nation and a council to council meeting. All those in favor? Any opposed? Would you like that recorded? No? Okay. There we are. We're done that one? Sounds good. Item 10.6. This was the late item. This is Childcare BC New Spaces Fund Creating New Spaces Grant. First motion to receive the report. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. And I guess I'm speaking to this one. So about a week and a half ago, staff indicated that there was a grant opportunity through the province that expired, or you had to apply by November 1st for potential $3 million to build and outfit a daycare facility. In order to do that, we would need to identify a location, and it wouldn't necessarily, from what I understand, necessarily have to be the ideal location. We would still have some time to work on that, come up with a base plan for what it would look like, have a service provider do a little bit of work and get this application submitted. No guarantee we'd get the funds. So I put this together. I've had the blessing of Mr. Yates to bring this forward because my concern was that it was going to be a lot on staff to put this forward in the next month. We have I reached out to the YMCA in Vancouver, talked to the general manager. They have given us a verbal commitment that they would provide the service at the site. They have done applications like this already as well, and they are willing to help work on the application. As well, there are some consultants or architects already who have done a lot of these spaces over the last 25 years who are also willing to help us put the application together. So what we're looking for at this point is that council approve that we can apply for this and that we can use up to $9,500 to hire 3 people to help with the background information that we need to put the application together. And any questions? Councillor Toth.
Without a specific site in mind, how useful is an architect and a civil engineer going to be on this particular project? Just high
Mhm.
level.
Well, one of the sites that we're looking at potentially is Kirkland. It's fairly flat. We would use that site if it would be possible. If we get approved, we would then look at other potential sites that would be similar and be able to move it forward. But that would give us a site to say, yes, this is a potential site. Any other questions? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I guess I just have concern with the funding source for this.
Mhm.
So since this is a late item, I'm just gonna confirm very basic what we're trying to do here. We're looking to hire external people with money from the general operating contingency fund
Yes.
to put this grant application together for us. That's correct?
Sort of, Councillor or Mr. Douglas?
It's up to $9,500 from like a general operating contingency account. So we had at the beginning of the year $75,000 in this account. And, you know, we usually use these things for emergencies or urgent matters. We have spent, I think, up to 15 grand out of that contingency so far account. And so it is not coming from a reserve or anything like that. Just for clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my concern is with that, the purpose of that account, it is for emergency items.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it should be reserved for. This is not an emergency item, nor is it an item mentioned on a strategic plan. So I think we could use a very similar idea, hire a consultant to work on a strategic plan item. And then that's a much more strategic use of our contingency fund or account.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Toth?
Yeah, you can't go using words like reserves when you got the director of finance on the line. Quick question for Mr. Douglas. What's left in our council contingency account?
Yes. I don't have the number, sorry, on me. I know we've just spent some of that money recently. So it would be under $3,000 probably.
Okay, thank you. I know we've set aside a bunch of money from that for the patio project and scaled that back, so I wasn't sure what we were.
Yeah, I would say there's probably 3,000 to 4,000 left in that the council contingency account.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to address Councillor McLean's point. When this was initially announced, we were in the we had an NDP government that was moving forward with a childcare program. And within the last number of weeks, that's changed. We don't know if this government's going to be back in. We don't know if this initiative is going to continue. This is an opportunity for us to potentially totally build and outfit a childcare facility, turnkey, everything, playground equipment, site, setup, sewer treatment, everything under this program. If we were to get this, I don't know if after this election on the 24th, this program will still be available. So that was one of the pieces behind me saying, I'd like to see if we could get this. $9,500 for potential $3 million for us, something that we know is needed on the Sunshine Coast. That's why I worked to get this put together and brought forward. This may be the only opportunity we get for this grant. I know it's available right now. I don't know what the long-term availability of it. Councillor McLean.
It's not our only opportunity. We've already received funding from the same funding stream for the School District 46 YCMA YMCA project
Mhm.
at Seashell Elementary. So
Right,
I
the
just
school
wanted to
district, the
clarify.
school district did, yes. But what I'm saying is, I don't know who's going to get into government and whether or not that will be one of their priorities and whether or not this program will even be available. Right? We don't know that going forward. So that was what was behind it for me as well. I know it's a short turnaround. Councillor Scott.
Is this the same grant that Qualicum just got received? They got awarded this $3 million?
Could be.
Yeah, I'd read somewhere that they got this same grant as well.
Mhm. Councillor Toth.
Yeah, I'm of mixed feelings on this. I think the investment for the potential is a great value. I worry about the concept of chasing grants for the concept of chasing grants. My question, no, you're gonna have to come back to me. I forgot my question. I'm sorry.
All right, anybody else? Councillor Kuster.
Just to respond to Alton, I mean, are we really chasing a grant when it's something that our community really needs?
Okay, Councillor Toth.
I remember what, it wasn't a question, it was more a comment than anything. And absolutely, our community does need this. We also know that with the facilities that are here on the coast are having staff shortages.
Mhm.
I know that the mayor and the other mayors and chair have been discussing things with CapU. But none of that's for sure. And we may build a facility and have nobody who can operate it, which is a great use of money that isn't ours, but it's not a great use of money overall. So I'm concerned about the staffing requirements. Is $3 million sufficient in this day and age? I'd be curious to know what it cost, for example, to build Memiman. I don't know that offhand. I should have asked this before this meeting. Probably could have had an answer, but I don't know what it cost them to build that particular facility. Is that sort of the size, the scale that we're looking at? Are we thinking bigger? Are we thinking smaller? I don't know. There's too many unknowns for me.
The information that I've been given is that the facility would be 40 by 80, 40 feet deep, 80 feet long, and that would be divided into two components. One would serve the 12 children 0 to 36, and the other 25 spaces for children 30 months to 5 years. And that $3 million is sufficient to build what's needed. Councillor McLean, Councillor Toth.
I'll let Councillor Toth go first.
Okay, Councillor Toth.
Sorry, Councillor McLean. I'm going to move recommendations 2, 3, and what I think are supposed to be 4, based on the way the wording is. There's just no bullet point for it. Recommendation 2, that council direct staff to apply for Child Care BC New Spaces Fund, creating New Spaces grant to build a facility for childcare spaces for 12 children 0 to 36 months and 25 spaces for children 30 months to 5 years. And consider liaising with the school district 46 to include before and after school spaces at a local elementary school. Maximum funding available is $3 million for 100% of eligible costs. Recommendation 3, that a consultant be retained to prepare the application to the Child Care BC New Spaces Fund to include any services needed from an architect, quantity surveyor, and civil engineer up to a maximum of $9,500. And recommendation 4, that this amount be allocated from the general operating contingency account.
All right, is there a seconder? Seconded, okay. Any other comments or questions? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I'll go because Councillor Toth jumped in with a motion. I just have a question about our involvement in this. So I see in the report that we're going to be preparing the RFPs and working through the procurement process for this. So that's our staff time. Will we have ownership over the building and essentially rent it out to an operator? Is that the proposed model, or are we not at that stage yet?
I think we would own the building because that's part of the agreement under the grant. Is that correct, Mr. Douglas?
Yes, we would have to own the building, yes.
Mhm.
And the rest of the model, I don't think we're far enough along
Mhm.
to know if we're gonna lease it or what we're gonna do.
Mhm. Okay,
So what we're looking at is the risk of owning a building that may not be operated as intended. I think it's a low risk, but there is one there.
mhm. Okay, any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on. Item 11.1, council reports. Okay, we're gonna start with, who wants to go first, and then I'll go around and circle from there. Okay, start with Councillor Toth, then Councillor Lamb, Councillor Kuster, Councillor Scott, and then Councillor McLean. All right, Councillor Toth, over to you.
I don't have much to report. I've been out of town. I attended UBCM meetings, both on behalf of the District of Sechelt and the SCRD. My SCRD, or the meetings I attended with the SCRD minutes are attached to my SCRD report. And hopefully the other councillors will talk about UBCM from the District of Sechelt perspective.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Kuster.
Okay, what did we do? We had a council conversation that wasn't very, didn't have any people attending, so that was a great conversation night. I attended the Community Neighbors of Sea-Watch meeting, which I thought was really great. The neighborhood was very proactive and concerned, and were able to get some great ideas together. So I thought that was really valuable.
That was the Shores, right?
Sorry, the Shores, yes.
Yes.
And I also attended a youth advisory committee. It's been a long time since everyone got together, so it's just everyone kind of giving reports on where everyone was at since COVID. Focused a lot on youth mental health awareness, and lots of talk of support of a national food program for all schools, and the importance of getting food and nutrition and access to the schools, and all the groups wanting to make sure that we advocate this with our MLA to get that kind of moving forward. Like I said, talk of things on how they've changed since COVID. So mental health is not physically seeing clients, not allowed to go into the school. So it's had quite an impact on the youth. There was a mention that a lot of the youth in transition have been housing at the Royal Reach Hotel. And they've been providing meals for them. So a hot meal at dinner and then like a bag lunch for the next day. So that's been really good for them. And just a challenge with just programs for youth and keeping things rolling. It's just been a challenge, obviously, all around with COVID. So it's just a kind of an update from everyone. A brief talk. So September 30th was the meeting, and it was also Orange Shirt Day. So I participated in Orange Shirt Day. And I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is. September 30th, participated in Orange T-shirt Day, which is Every Child Matters. And for those who don't know what that is, it's a story that comes from a residential survivor, Phyllis Jack, stolen from her family, stripped of her culture, whose orange shirt was taken from her on the first day of residential school and never given back. This is an important thing. I was 11 years old when the last residential school was closed in BC and 13 in Canada, and something that was never taught about in schools. So I think it's really good to make awareness on this. And I notice it is starting to being taught in schools now, which is good because it needs to be discussed. What else? Yeah, and I think it's important to remember the survivors, but also not forget all the children that died in residential schools. And I think that is that's my report. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Nothing to report on my end. I left town shortly after the last meeting and then got back on Sunday.
All right, Councillor McLean.
Let's try that again. Okay. It was Active Transportation Week last week, so I just want to acknowledge that. I spent the week walking and busing into Gibsons, so that was a fun time, and I enjoyed the walk. So walking to the bus isn't all that bad. In more business-related stuff, the Housing Advisory Committee had a bit of a hiatus in August and September, but we will be meeting again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Link is on our website on Zoom. There is also I don't know if you heard, there's a provincial election. And on behalf of Voice Lab, I'm going to be hosting an all candidates forum, and that will be on October 15th. And I think that's all I'm going to do for now.
Thank you. All right, what have I got here? I think many of us attended a housing needs assessment workshop. It was where it was presented by the consultants to all of the local governments, some of the high points, etc. There will be a presentation coming to council at one of our meetings. So then it will be presented to the public. I know it's already been presented to the regional or to the town of Gibsons and regional district. It's on the Thursday agenda, so it'll be coming to us shortly. September 22nd to 24th, some of us attended Union of BC Municipality Conference. What was quite interesting was the Monday, so the UBCM started Tuesday. On Monday, the writ was dropped by the province. And so UBCM staff had to scramble because some of the workshops and sessions they had some of the ministers in them, for example. So they had to change those around really quickly. They did a good job in doing that. One of the highlights was having Margaret Atwood as a speaker. She was the keynote address. She's got quite the sense of humor. And she had a stack of books with her. So when they'd ask, you know, what would you suggest we look at for this? She'd hold up a book and say, this one, read this one. So she had a list of them and she made sure everybody had the list. Some of the sessions that took place were on supporting communities, responding to you know, the digital issues that we're having now with the fact that we're all working remotely, and they talked about what that looks like in some of the areas where they don't have internet. There's another one, economic recovery, building back better and stronger. So some of the things that they're looking at. It was interesting, our Sunshine Coast Community Task Force that we put together, there was another group that talked about that, how they did a fairly similar thing in their community. It was Quesnel, and they had more of a business focus. New Now, Life After COVID, talked about what planning would look like, for example. I mean, if you think about us and our offices and our staff and businesses and their staff, what does that look like? Given this is continuing, it's not such a short period of time that we thought it would be. September 29th, there was a vital report presented by the community foundations. This was a collaboration between the Sunshine Coast, Whistler, Squamish, Bowen Island, and West Vancouver. And they looked at where we are similar and where we are different. And some of the things they found is that we have similar challenges. We're all challenged by rapid growth, poor transportation choices, aging populations, limited employment options, lack of affordable housing, and we also are dealing with challenges posed by climate change. What they're going to look at is, given these different areas and what the issues are showing up, what can we learn from each other and what can we collaborate on moving forward? On the 30th of September, I attended the Mayor's Forum for the Lower Mainland District for the RCMP. And one of the big conversations that will have an impact on us is the City of Surrey and the fact that they're going to be transitioning to their own police force. That has been approved. What they're looking at is, and just to give you an idea, and I sent this to council when I sent out some of the notes, Surrey has about 1/10 of all the RCMP members in BC. And there are on average about 2,000 frontline RCMP members in Canada, 7,000 in BC. That doesn't make any sense. 7,000 total. Surrey has about 850. Once they transition, they're anticipated to be the 15th or 16th largest police service in Canada. So consider what happens if we take that number out of our BC numbers And then we as municipalities have to continue to provide funding for the integrated teams, for example, right? Training, administration. So what they're doing right now, they're just at the place where they are identifying the areas that that are going to have impacts. And then they're going to look at what the impacts are, and that information will have to be communicated out. Councillor McLean and I met with the East Porpoise Bay Community Associations with regards to short-term rentals. And there's a letter on here from the chambers. We'll talk about that when we get there. Starting Fridays, this past Friday, Vancouver Coastal Health has resumed their weekly calls with local governments in the service area. So this is going to be keeping us updated on changes that are happening. I met with Chief Paul on Friday to discuss common issues. We do this regularly. One or the other will reach out and say, okay, it's time for another get together, and we sit down and chat about what's going on in their area, what's going on in our area, and how we can work together. Sunshine Coast Homelessness Advisory Committee. The applications close at the end of October for the residents for the Gibson Supportive Housing Facility. And they are anticipating that it will open in early January. So they don't know how many applications come in. They all go to BC Housing. BC Housing does a little bit of a culling, and then they come back here to the Sunshine Coast. And the service providers are actually the ones who go through and narrow it down to maybe 50, 55 people. And then they actually do one-on-one interviews because they're looking to see how these people will work together with the others in the facility. I took part in an inaugural meeting of the Capilano University Advisory Committee group. So they're looking at it's government leaders as well as other members of the community. So seniors, teens. We also had representatives from the school district there, and it was looking at how can we ensure that we liaise with them and they liaise with us so that we can ensure that the university is actually relevant for our community. So this will be a regular meeting where we dialogue back and forth. We gave them a list of things to do, and we basically said, we want to see action because we're not waiting. We'd love to have you come along and work with us, but we're going forward. And they got that. And then finally, I am pleased to announce that we recently received confirmation that we were approved for the BC Air Access Grant for the airport runway improvements. And a press release should be coming out early next week with details. I'm going to just talk about UBCM briefly. I know Councillor Toth has got the information about the SCRD meetings in his, and he'll be talking about that in his report a bit. So the District of Sechelt joined with the Town of Gibsons and the Regional District, and we approached the meetings as Team Sunshine Coast. So I think we had, 14 meetings during the week? And I think it was I've got a list, I think there were 14 of them. And we actually split up the hosting or the chairing duties so that each of us didn't have to prepare for each one of the meetings. I know Councillor McLean took one of them, Councillor Toth took one, I took a couple of them. One of the meetings that we did have was with the Attorney General and around public safety, where we indicated that our local RCMP detachment would most likely be putting forward a request for 2 additional provincial RCMP members here. I think that's, mental health and addictions. We asked for additional funding for mental health supports on the Sunshine Coast here. And we're told that there were some additional funding streams that are going to be coming out, and our local hospital would be able to access some of those. So I think that's my report. I'm going to turn over to Councillor Toth for his SCRD report.
Just before I talk about it, something you said sort of twigged on me there. We've got other municipalities in the Lower Mainland that have their own municipal police forces, but they still participate in the integrated teams. So I don't know if Surrey is going to really want to try and go it alone on the integrated teams, or if they're going to participate in the same way that Vancouver and West Vancouver do, for example. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Yes, that's part of the the dialogue that has to happen. And one of the issues is that some of the members, because Surrey is so big, some of the members of the integrated teams actually are in Surrey. And so they don't know, I mean, at this point, they don't know how many of the members working in Surrey would want to go to the Surrey Police Force, how many would not, so there's lots to work out down there. So they'll be working that out and giving us more information.
We might end up with all sorts of extra RCMP members looking for somewhere to work.
That comment was made as well. That's right. Don't know.
Yeah, SCRD report is not attached to the agenda, unfortunately. I did email it out yesterday afternoon. Like I said, I was out of town all last week, so I didn't get a chance to put it together. I was quite fortunate in that we do have notes from our SCRD UBCM minister meetings that were helpfully prepared by Tracy Hinks and were part of the agenda for tomorrow. So I thought I would steal those and circulate those to council. Not a whole lot to report other than, what's on the pages. I actually found the minister meetings to be quite interesting because you didn't really know who was on the call until you finished the round of introductions. And who knows, maybe as soon as the round of introductions finished, everybody buggered off and hung up on the call. We really don't know. I found the format of UBCM to be disappointing. I hope they can go back to a physical convention again next year. And if they can't, I'm not sure I'm going to bother going next year. Because other than the minister meetings, which by the second week when they called the election, suddenly the minister meetings seemed disingenuous as well. So I wasn't totally impressed with the timing of everything there, but there it is. Yeah, SCRD notes are here. They're on our website. There should be printed copies in the room for anybody who's actually in the room right now. And happy to take any questions. I did speak at the minister meeting on ICI packaging and paper products recycling regulation changes, which was an SCRD meeting supporting an SCRD motion. And it was great. First meeting, I was the introducer for it, and we got everything we wanted right off the top, because they've already announced that they're going to be making changes and they want public feedback on those changes. So I thought that was a very successful meeting. But yeah, happy to take any questions.
All right, any questions of Councillor Toth? I'm just going to make a comment about UBCM. The format, I think what helped me as I sat in front of my computer for 3 days was that we had a separate chat group among the those attendees on the Sunshine Coast. And so we were chatting back and forth. So I didn't feel so totally alone attending the conference, because the virtual meeting room that was set up didn't work very well in the UBCM format. So it was actually nice to be able to chat back and forth among our group and know that we weren't just alone sitting in this, and another piece is initially we didn't know how many people were attending. So they did tell us later. So that was good too.
What was the total? I can't remember. It was, there was 1,000?
I thought they said by the time we were done, they were about up to 3,000.
3,000? Okay.
Yeah. All right. Next, correspondence. Item 12.1, motion to receive the correspondence. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And there are some items on here for action. Number 1 and number 3 actually kind of go together. So number 1, they're looking for us to, let me find what this says here. We have to confirm our support for the extension of the approved authorizations prior to extensions being granted. And we need to do that by October 16th, 2020. So we either have to do it at, well, we'd have to do it at this meeting. So this is on page 113. It's in bold, about halfway down the page. So what the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch is looking at doing is extending the temporary expanded service areas. They were going to have them expire at the end of October. They're now looking to have that as October 31st, 2021. So what would you like to do, Councillor Toth?
Quick question, I suppose, for Joanne, if she's around, is how does that affect our patio program? Because I believe our patio programs are all set to expire at the end of this month.
You're good.
Thank you. I'm not 100% aware of all the details around this program, but I do know that this actually relates to the liquor, relates to liquor licenses and the approvals that restaurants and facilities that serve liquor. It relates to the approvals that they have to go through to get permitting with the province, whereas our patio program had nothing to do with the provincial liquor laws. It was, as you know, as council is aware, program for outside dining. So I do not believe it would affect our program whatsoever.
Right, Councillor Toth?
I would like to move that council confirm their support for extension of TESA authorizations in our jurisdiction.
And it looks like it's seconded by 3 different people. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. That's that one. Next one is
If I
the
could
letter.
just jump in.
Yep, go ahead.
Is there anything we need to do on our end? So I'm wondering if we just want to request a staff report to discuss the implications of extending the deadline on our policies.
Okay. Joanne, do you want to, what would you like us to do? Or are you just gonna, you can look at that and bring something back if we need to do something?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question. Could you please repeat it?
So I believe we had 2 separate motions at the beginning. Is one to deal with the liquor, and then we had our patio pilot project. I'd like to request a report back about extending that project in line with the liquor extension.
So I can report that planning staff is preparing a report to bring forward to council on our patio pilot project. The decision was made to wait until after October 31st to bring the project, or to bring the summary report back as to how the pilot project worked. It was agreed among staff, let's wait until after October 31st, just, so that we go through the whole time. So at this time, planning does plan to bring the report forward to you. We do not, at this point, we don't have any outstanding requests that might be affected one way or another by this new extension. And again, we have not dealt with the pilot patio project in any way related to liquor sales. We have, if we were going to extend outside dining for any establishment to the patio, we don't have the authority to extend their liquor license in any way. So they would still be going through that process with the province. And that was never considered as part of the council's pilot project. It was how can we seat people, how can we get people using our, being able to do outside dining on our right of way. The liquor license would be a completely separate thing, and they would still have to apply to the province on there. I don't know if that.
So it sounds like staff has this in hand.
Not if you wanted to extend it past October 31st, but yes, you're definitely going to get a full report outlining how the pilot project went and that.
Right, but I guess what I'm seeing here, sorry, we are having some echoing now. Maybe you could turn yours off while we're talking for a second. Thank you. Okay, so, no, still echoing.
Is that on my?
Thank you. All right, so what's happening here is the province came out with the extension of space for facilities, and they had initially said that they could apply, there was going to be no charge, but they could use a larger space for service, and that was going to expire October 31st of this year. And now they've come out and said, if we confirm our support, they will allow those to continue on to October 31st of 2021. So we have temporary patios set up that expire at the end of October 2020. We may have some of those who would like to extend those through to October 31st, 2021 at this point. So that would be, do we want to, if we've now said we're going to support this, do we want to notify them that they could extend if they want to? They have to apply to the province. They would also have to apply back to us to be able to extend that. So that would typically follow out of the decision we've made.
Yes, Your Worship, council could certainly direct that staff notify any of the businesses that have business licenses in the district that have outside liquor sales, patio liquor sales. That's certainly something we could do, but as Your Worship points out, it is a provincial program. We would, council always receives a copy of the application and is able to give your comments on whether you agree with the liquor license application, but ultimately it would be the province's, under the province's authority. But yes, we can certainly notify, it would be easy enough to notify any business license holders that have liquor sales on their patio.
Okay.
If council goes ahead and approves it.
Would you like us to make that recommendation then?
You certainly could if you wish.
Okay, Councillor McLean, did you want to make a recommendation since you brought this up?
I've kind of lost the stream here, so.
Okay. Maybe that staff notify the businesses that applied to us for outdoor patios, that we have indicated we support the TESA authorizations to October 31st, 2021. And that if they apply to get their license extended with the province, that they could then apply to us to get their patio extended as well. Something like that.
Understanding better what questions are being asked, I guess just to confirm that as of now, we have one patio, the SDBA, that's under our pilot program. It's the SDBA patio that's on Calgary Street. Council will recall there was the application that came forward to you in the last at the last council meeting regarding Pebbles Restaurant, but they have submitted an email saying that they do not plan to move forward with their proposal this year. I'm not up with the liquor licensing aspect because the planning department looks after those, so that's why I'm being a little kind of fuzzy on it. But we can certainly make sure that that any of the current patios that serve any of the establishments that have a patio that serve liquor, we can certainly make sure they're aware of this. There's a good chance they will be anyway because they have a liquor license. The province probably contact them anyway, but we can certainly make sure that they're aware.
So this hasn't been seconded. It sounds like it's being taken care of. We don't need to do this. That's just more work for you guys. All right. Next item is the letter from the chamber with regards to short-term rentals. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Yeah, I think actually I asked for this to come onto the agenda. I wanted to highlight that city portal. It's a great tool that Airbnb specifically is making available. Right now it's a pilot program in half a dozen cities in North America. Has the potential to be a great freebie, to be perfectly honest, to help us with our enforcement going forward. But the question is, what sort of a timeline are they going to have for rolling this out? How do we try and get unlocked as one of the pilot communities? I'd be really interested to find out if they're very hard and fast on those half a dozen communities, and they'll roll this out in 2026 to the rest of Airbnb's platform. Yeah, so I'd like a little more information about it, but I don't know who or how we go about this. I would have perhaps inquired with our director of planning, but he's not on the call tonight, so I'm not sure if there's any action to take on this yet. Yeah, thanks.
Who we could potentially reach out to for information would be Sunshine Coast Tourism. I'm sure with the information that they're gathering, this might be something that they're really paying attention to.
That's fair. Do we have a liaison with Sunshine Coast Tourism? I see a nod down there. Is Councillor McLean volunteering, or does he know who it is?
Oh, sorry. I was just thinking, like, we could talk to Paul. Not
Paul
liaison
came
from our
on.
end.
Yeah, Paul came on. Yeah, Paul came on. Yeah. Okay. Would you like to do that, Councillor Toth, or would you like to have staff do that?
Oh, I think I can take up the conversation. I've got the potential for a greater discussion and perhaps a motion or 6 to come out of this anyways, but it's not ready for tonight. So I'm happy to take it away and work on it for a bit.
Okay. So as a follow-up to the short-term rental conversation, I mentioned earlier that Councillor McLean and I met with the East Porpoise Bay Community Association. And they have one area in particular that I'm sure we're all aware of, where they have a concern for some of the bigger short-term rentals. They feel that it's really changing the dynamics in the community over there. During our conversation with them, we indicated that one of the things that we need to do as a council and as a district is actually go out to the wider community and get information and input from the greater community. We're only hearing from a few locations at this point. So the East Porpoise Bay president actually did email and indicate that she has reached out to all of the other community associations and requested that they give us information about their situation and how short-term rentals are showing up in their communities, what the impact is, etc. Councillor McLean and I, though, had a little further conversation. And one of the things that I think we as a council and what the community would like to see is something moving forward with regard to short-term rentals, more than what's just going to show up in the zoning bylaw. So we did find out that there is consultant money available, that it could be something that we could have, we could task our planning department with, and our communications department with hiring a consultant to gather that information. It would remove it from the political arena and actually make it something that we could get input from the greater community so that we would actually have the information we need to be able to start drafting a bylaw. Councillor Toth.
Okay, I'll suggest it right now then. What about the idea of putting together a task force mixed with council and community members to look at this and come back with a very specific set of recommendations to council about bylaw improvements, enhancements, changes, or additions that need to be made to start looking at short-term rentals? Because certainly we're the ones that get all the complaints.
Yeah.
So we certainly have it's nice to remove it from the political sphere, but we're the ones that get all the complaints. But at the same time, we do have, you know, the business community, like the chamber, interested in seeing no or limited changes or some smaller regulations, whatever. What impact does that have on our business licensing, our water consumption, our enforcement measures, the fees that we charge for our licenses? You know, should we be charging more so we can hire a specific short-term rentals bylaw officer who, you know, even if they're part-time, whose job is to take care of the enforcement issues around short-term rentals. So that's the conversation that I was hoping to have perhaps at the next council meeting, but here we are. I think it's a good idea. I've had somebody reach out to me actually, and Councillor McLean as well, with some suggestions based on other communities, what they've done. You know, requirements to put your business license number right in your listing. If you don't have a license number listed right there on your Airbnb or VRBO listing, it's a fine. You know, it's a great way to start bringing these things into compliance with perhaps not a lot of changes necessary, or perhaps also not necessarily spending a lot of money on consultants.
Okay. Councillor McLean, you had,
Yeah, I don't feel like we're quite at this stage of starting to come up with solutions yet. I think what we need now is to hear from more diverse voices. People have such strong opinions on this.
no, really?
So I want to look at a process, how we can bring people together and have that conversation, and how we can try and get to the root cause of why people have such strong feelings towards short-term rentals. And that's why the mayor and I kind of came up with this approach and doing this targeted consultation. So we can really bring more people into the conversation. And then it's not just the people with the strongest opinions. We get a more representative view of this issue that I think affects a lot of people on the coast or in Sechelt.
So I know that part of, I mean, we've been told part of the consultation that's going to happen with regards to the zoning bylaw will do some preliminary work around short-term rentals. So they're going to be doing up a survey that people can take, which could lead into this other. I don't know what kind of, I mean, it sounds like we want to give it a little bit more thought and maybe bring this back as a conversation, maybe at our committee of the whole meeting, maybe at a council meeting. Maybe we can take that offline and see where we want to go and what we want to do. Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I think the mayor and I benefited for sitting down together and thinking, how the heck are we going to approach this? And I recognize that the rest of council wasn't involved in that conversation. And I think that's probably a conversation that we should be having. Not what to do, just how to approach it. How do we start getting down the path of making an actual decision on this? Because the thing I heard really loud and clear from the East Porpoise Bay Community Association is that we're taking too long. And we've been tripping over our feet. We don't know where to head. We need to come up with that collective approach. And I think, like the mayor says, maybe a committee of the whole workshop, or maybe another workshop that's separate from committee of the whole. I don't know where the line is exactly on if we can do that.
Okay, so what if we made a recommendation like this, that given we would like to move forward with a separate bylaw for short-term rentals, we're looking to staff to come back to us with potential strategies or ways forward to solicit information from the community. And that, I mean, that could be, like Councillor Toth was mentioning, a task force, it could be a consultant, it could be, you know, don't know. I mean, they've probably got some ideas as well. I'm sure they do. Councillor Toth?
I don't know that it's the right time to drop it in staff's lap to come back to us with something yet. You know, I do recognize, yeah, this has been taking a long time, not just here, but on the whole Sunshine Coast. There's finally a little bit of breakup in the logjam that is dealing with this. It's October now. You know, we have till April, May, you know, we can get bylaws passed in 2 sessions of council if we know what we're looking to do. So the question is, can we get sufficient consultation and input done over a winter with the community and the community associations and the business organizations and Sunshine Coast Tourism and to feed into this, so that we're not another year down the road going, man, I wish we'd done something before this tourist season kicked in. So I don't necessarily want to burden staff with it if it's something that perhaps Councillor McLean and I can start the ball rolling on.
Okay. So should we put it on our agenda for next council meeting and have a conversation at that point, having some offline conversations and then maybe come back at that point to see how we move it forward? The time, I guess the issue I have with the timing is, yes, the next spring, next summer, we have short-term rental season again. But if we are looking at putting a bylaw in place in March or April, that's too late for next season. People have already booked.
Yeah, and I believe the Gibson's approach is to implement it in January.
Yes. Councillor Toth?
The sooner the better. I just worry about staff's capacity to take on more things. You know, it comes back to that. We got a zoning bylaw that we're in the middle of updating.
Yes.
We've been updating since 2012. All sorts of things. And I just worry about putting something else on their plate. I guess the alternative is, if we are going to put this on their plate, what are we taking off their plate?
Okay, so that's a conversation we can have offline with staff and then perhaps come back to a future council meeting. Okay. Next, Sechelt Downtown Business Association. They are requesting approval from council to move forward with the project and a letter of support to be used for funding applications and fundraising efforts. Councillor McLean.
So they brought a similar request for the same project to our September 2nd meeting. And did we make a recommendation? I don't see anything in the minutes.
I believe they were asking for $50,000 and we referred it to the budget process.
Okay.
But they, at that point, were not asking us for letters of support. Yeah, Joanne?
Your worship, yes, my understanding is, and actually my recollection is, council did not actually pass a resolution when this came forward a couple of council meetings ago, where they asked for the $50,000. But your worship, you're correct. There was general direction given that staff follow up with them and ask them to prepare a business plan that council could consider during 2021 budget deliberations. Staff subsequently confirmed with the SDBA that they were going to withdraw their request for funding at this time and look at other potential grant options. And so basically you see the letter you see in front of you is practically the same as the last one, except for the last paragraph, where, as you say, they removed the request for funding from the district, and they're just asking at this time for letters of support. Or a letter or a resolution from council supporting their endeavors to go out and look for grant money. So supporting the project in principle for them to apply for grants.
Okay. What would you like to do? Councillor McLean?
I would like the SCBA to focus their efforts on a more visible street. I don't see the justification for why Periwinkle Lane. I'm not aware of any businesses that front to it. It's an alley. That's what it is. So why the effort here, and why not Cowie, Wharf, Torito, any of the other streets?
Well, they did focus on Wharf. They applied to ICE-T for some funds and were approved, right? So that will be done. through their efforts and ours. I think what they're saying here is there actually are a number of people that use this lane, and they'd like to see it improved. So do we support it? Do we not support it? Councillor Toth?
I think if they're not asking us to put forward any money at this time, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with us supporting in principle what they're trying to do. Every street and every lane in downtown Sechelt needs to be improved. Right now, this is the one that they've chosen to focus on. And I think we should offer our support and endorsement on this, and then let them go away and figure it out.
And would you like to make a recommendation that we support in principle and would provide them with a letter of support to be used for funding applications and fundraising efforts?
Sounds good. That's exactly what I think I said.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Seconded. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you. And then finally, motion to receive the RCMP monthly stats. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Any comments or questions on those? Any emergency items from staff? Joanne?
Emergency item, I apologize. I'm looking to go back to the correspondence item on page, what is it, page 116, that we actually have on there as for information, and it's a similar email to item 1, but this one's on behalf of the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association. And again, I apologize, I wasn't up to speed on this, but I've taken the time to read it, and I'm suggesting that this one is a little bit different than the first email on this subject that Council just looked at, because that was from the province. This is actually on behalf of the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association, and they actually say in this email, with under the regulation, with your jurisdiction support for patio extensions, the LCRB will reissue authorization letters. So I'm not exactly sure, but I'm not exactly sure if Council needs to do anything on this one, but it wouldn't hurt maybe on while you are all together in a Council meeting to perhaps pass a resolution that just sort of says that the Council supports the LCRB's temporary expanded service areas for patios until October 31st, 2021. Under the new policy directive 20-26, which I'm reading right off the second paragraph there. And then we just have it in the minutes in case that was the intent.
I think that, Joanne, I think that's what we did on page 113, because that's what the province was asking us to do. This was, so the restaurateur letter is referring to the one on page 113 that came from the province.
Okay, my apologies. Thank you for putting up with me. Then we got what we need. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Joanne. Councillor Toth.
Perhaps not an emergency item, but can we do something before the next meeting to improve Joanne's microphone situation? Unfortunately, I'm having a really hard time hearing you, and I don't know if it's the room configuration or the location of the microphone that you're using, or what the problem is in the room, but maybe we need to do another audio test at some point.
Yeah, we had issues last time because there was all this echoing, and so they found a workaround, tried this one out this time. So if it's not great, then we'll have to go back to the drawing board.
Just need to place this temporary microphone in a little bit different location. We'll work on that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any emergency items? I would look for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you.